The text feature with Creative Studio version 7 has been rewritten, and I find it very user-friendly in this particular version. I posted a picture on Facebook of a quilt that I did a name on and was asked to do a video on it. So that's what this Barn Buddy is going to be about. I'm going to explain a little bit to you about statlique, which is appliquing with the statler, and I'm going to show you how the text tool worked to be able to put this name on this quilt. Hello, my name is Joanne Knight. Welcome to the barn. The first thing that you have to do whenever you're doing statlique is prepare your fabric. I took a regular fabric. Batiks usually work the best because they don't fray as much, because this is a raw edged applique. I put a fusible on the back of it, ironed it on, take the paper off of the fusible. I like to use Soft Fuse by Shades Textile because it keeps the quilt nice and soft. And I've used this in several different instances, and I've used it for a good little while, and I've been real happy with the outcome of it. So once I prepare my fabric and have that fusible onto the back of it, I need to then decide where I'm going to place my name on the quilt. You can see from the screen that I have done a boundary of where I want that name to appear. So let's show how I set this up. I'm going to start a new quilt group. I'm going to change my grid size to 5 inches because it'll be easier for you to see. With my machine head, I'm going to draw a boundary on the quilt that tells me exactly where I want that name to be positioned. So hang on just a second. Let me go draw my boundary. You can see that I clicked out my boundary. It's just a rough little mock-up of where I want that name to be because I want to be sure that it's positioned correctly. Notice that I still have a crosshair on the computer screen because I am still in boundary, draw boundary. And you can tell that also by the prompt box on the lower left of the screen and by the keypad window. So I'm going to left click on Exit Drawing because draw boundary, like draw pattern, is a 2-step process now. I'm going to scroll out just a little bit. My boundary is selected. You see how it's a different color? It's a little bit brighter blue. If I click off of it, you can see that it changes a little bit. So I want my boundary selected, and I'm going to go right up here to my tool strip because I have a little cheater icon on my tool strip, which is Draw Text, and I'm going to left click on that. What you're going to see is the setup box come up. We have a cursive, which is called Statler fonts, that I can type in whatever I want Creative Studio to say. When I type this, you'll hear Creative Studio do a doing as I type it. And this is a cursive font right here, and it will sew continuously. But on this particular one, I did not want a cursive font because I wanted to do it with applique. So I'm going to switch to block, and you see that it changes automatically on the screen to the block font that I have selected. And this Comic Sans one is one of my favorite ones, and it's one that I used on this particular quilt. If I use this slider bar in the setup box, you will see all of the different fonts that we have available to us. And if I left click on one, Creative Studio will automatically change to that font. That's why you hear that little doink in the background. And it will continue to do that as long as I keep clicking. At last count, there were 435 different fonts in Creative Studio. And you can choose any of them that you want to. Any block font is going to quilt out with starts and stops. You see how these letters don't connect? I'm going to say OK. And when I select the word, it is a pattern. The entire word is one pattern. If I switch to nodes, you can see that I have lots of different nodes in here. So there are jump stitches, and your jump stitch is really obvious when you see this straight blue line that goes from one really dark node to the next really dark node, that's going to be your dividing point should you need to restart or should you need to divide this pattern. Creative Studio is going to sew this first letter, then it will stop before it goes to the next letter. As long as I have in service, technical support, controller definitions, stop at jump stitch checked in this middle column in the center, and I always have that checked. That's kind of a given for me. So it's going to stop instead of dragging the thread from one letter to the next, which is going to give me a perfect opportunity to lay my fabric down to quilt out the letter K. Then I will trim out this letter, tell Creative Studio to continue, and place my fabric down to be able to quilt out the letter E. It's really important that you use your crosshairs to be able to determine if you have enough fabric covering that pattern to be able to quilt it out. And ask me how I know that one. So your crosshairs play a vital part, even though I have this boundary, in making sure that your fabric is placed correctly. I trim out each letter as I go, each one as it quilts. I'm going to trim it out, and then I'm going to go to the next letter. When I get completely finished quilting out my name, I am going to then iron it down so that the fusible adheres to whatever the quilt is or whatever the fabric is. It's just pretty straightforward and pretty simple to do, and I love being able to do this and personalize a quilt. There's something else that you might not be aware of. If I select my word and I hit the letter X on my keyboard, it will flip that name horizontally. If I wanted to do this, I could actually fold back the quilt top, quilt a label or quilt a name on just the backing of the quilt, then pull the quilt top back over it and quilt the rest of the quilt, and now I have a permanent label on the back of that quilt because I have flipped it horizontally. I hope this helps you in be able to see the different things that you can do with text tool and the different ways that you can add the text tool to a quilt to make it just a little bit more personal. This is for Kennedy for Christmas, so I'm thinking she's going to be a little bit surprised. Thank you.